All right, everybody, welcome to the first episode of the Hangout Hot Seat, the show where we ask questions both useful and fun so that you can learn a little something and get to know a member of the Copyblogger family better. And speaking of the hot seat, when your first guest is your boss and CEO, who's really on the hot seat? Joining Dave and I today, all the way from Boulder, Colorado, is Copyblogger CEO Brian Clark. Brian, welcome to the show. Are you ready for the hot seat?
I am, and I think everyone knows that you guys actually run the show. So,
Okay, so here are the ground rules real quick. Damien and I are going to go back and forth asking you questions, and you're going to have about 30 to 45 seconds to answer each one. When you hear the ticking sound, assuming I'm bold enough to play it while you're talking, that means that your time is running out, and we ask that you
just
please
like
finish
the
answer.
Oscars music thing.
Yes.
Now
exactly.
I do have executive privilege to override that, right?
Right. You can talk right through it. Exactly. And then when you're done, we will then judge your answer and give you either applause or probably very rarely the sad trombone.
Oh, this is great. I love it.
And Damien's going to be keeping track so that we'll be able to tally it up at the end.
This was Jess's score.
Yes.
Just so you know. That's what you're aiming for. 9.76.
Oh, I can take Jess.
That's the goal. Okay, so our very first question to kick things off. The tagline for New Rainmaker is media, not marketing. What does this mean in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, it's a different way of explaining content marketing, because content marketing is probably the worst phrase ever invented to describe what we do online in order to effectively market. So it's not creating some keyword stuff content because Google wants you to create content. It's not just creating some stuff because people want to share content on social media. It's really taking this media first approach to marketing, in which you give valuable information like would appear in a magazine or a cable television show. You get the idea, or a radio broadcast, or the analogous thing for Hangouts, and giving people something useful that they might want to consume, as opposed to your marketing spiel, which they don't. But it all ties together to what you do as a business.
Excellent answer. Applause.
So can media still can it be entertainment too?
It can be. I mean, what we think is entertaining may not be shared by, for example, this. We're having a good time.
I just lost the point there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, going back to the early days of Copyblogger, it's kind of normal now, but no one was making pop culture analogies to try to teach online marketing. So that was my way of trying to make it entertaining and engaging, but also educational. And again, that's why I use cable television shows like Mythbusters or Love It or Listed or all of these things. They're entertaining, but they teach you something in the process. That's the idea.
Right. Good. All right, Brian. So we're coming up on the 3rd anniversary of Google+. What are your thoughts about Google+ now? Anything changed? Still a must in the content marketer's toolbox, and why?
I love Google+, always have. That hasn't changed. I don't spend as much time on it because I just don't have as much time. But the interesting thing is, Facebook keeps sticking it to people in, marketers mainly. Facebook has its own issues where they've got more money than, actual passion in their community anymore, so they have to go buy WhatsApp and all this kind of thing. So that remains to be seen what happens to Facebook, but I do think it's an opportunity that remains for Google+. The other thing is Twitter is basically going to overhaul everything that made it what it is, so that it can become more like Facebook, I guess, So that's effectively going to have more and more people looking at Google+, because guess what? Google doesn't need to make money from Google+, like Twitter does, like Facebook does. It's a data collection outpost that fuels their main business. Now, will eventually you get ads on Google+? Sure, but it's not going to be horrible. Google+ can always hang back and say, you guys go ahead and screw it up, and we'll wait and welcome everyone with open arms. And I really think this year you may see more migration. People have stopped hating on Google Plus quite so much because they're like, wait a minute, this may be our viable alternative.
What one thing can Google Plus do to make it better? And what one thing would you like to see improve on it?
I love the way, the way comments work, the way rich media works. It's very friendly. What they can do is leave their hands off of it from a monetization standpoint. Get the crowd over here because, number one, you get the direct benefit of access to what's working as far as content. They don't have any access to Facebook, and they don't have access really anymore to Twitter because they don't have the fire hose agreement. So Matt Cutts has said we don't use those two platforms in our algorithm because we can't trust that we're getting an accurate signal. They've got that with Google+. So what they need to do is just make sure more of the crowd comes over, and they've got really an amazing data platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a golf clap, Jerod?
No, that was a legit clap. We're going to go back to talking about Google in a second, too, so kind of hold that thought. But I want to ask you about music, because you're obviously a big music lover, and so I want to ask you specifically about concerts. What's the best concert that you've ever been to, the last one that you went to, and then the next one that you want to go see?
Oh, man. Those last two are tough because I'm old now, in case you haven't noticed. And by the time the concert starts, I'm usually asleep at this point. They've got two great theaters here in Boulder, for the Fox and the Boulder Theater, and they're great bands coming through all the time, and I've yet to be to either one in 2 years. But I'm going to cheat and say, let's see. Okay, my first concert was Kiss in 5th grade. Which was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, I went with my friend's little kid. We were all little kids, but my friend's mom took us. My parents, God, no, they wouldn't do that. But I was like, what's that funny smell in the air? And now, speaking of Boulder, that's what I smell everywhere I go. So talk about joining your childhood.
That was the first concert my wife ever been to. Was a Kiss concert too.
Really? I mean, yeah, if you're Gen X and you can say your first concert was Kiss in the 5th grade, that's like some cred points right there.
Yeah. All right. Hey, so speaking of bands, why in the world do you like the Foo Fighters so much?
I'm not sure I like them so much. I just started Foo Fighters Friday because I like alliteration. I mean, I like Dave Grohl a lot. I think he's an awesome guy. I don't religiously listen to Foo Fighters music, though.
All right. So did it upset you? So I'm a big Kurt Cobain fan. When he died, I remember exactly where I was. But the idea of David Grohl going up and now being the front man of a band really upset me. Did that do it to you too?
No. I mean, I even said this once on Twitter, which got mixed reaction, like a lot of things I say on Twitter. But I was like, Dave Grohl's the hero, not Kurt Cobain, because Cobain, it's really hard to say. Yes, I'm like you. At that time, I identified with him. I was 26, and I knew all well the 27 club that he joined, and I was a very angry, self-destructive young man at the time. So at that point, literally, I was like, that's next year. I don't think I'm ready to go. So, by the time I was 30, I had completely reinvented my life. So it's like, it's like Zeppelin said, Damien. There are two paths you could go, but in the long. Well, fuck, never mind.
That was a good answer.
Okay, so I want to go back to talking about Google real quick. And on a recent episode of New Rainmaker with Robert Bruce, you talked about how Google could become the next big movie studio. How would this occur, and why would it occur?
Well, that was just throwing out there the idea that companies like Coca-Cola, Apple, Google, Amazon have more money than any other media company on the planet. By far. It's not even close, right? Like, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post himself with change that he had in his couch, okay? So the idea, on one hand, that media is the most powerful influencer on the planet by far, combined with these companies that have better business models, when you put that together, that's what content marketing is. That's why we at Copyblogger take a media-first approach to marketing, because it's more powerful and we can make more money, literally 10 times more. If you look at what our traffic is on Copyblogger, how much we could make from an advertising model compared to the model that we have, right? So if Netflix can become a producer of original content, why can't Coca-Cola or Google or whatever? I recently spoke at SMX, and instead of movies for Google, I had Google News on a slide, and I crossed out news and put journalism. Because isn't Google already moving from the organizer of all the world's information to producing it, or at least scraping it and putting it above the top results, right? Is that really inconceivable for where Google might go? I don't think so.
Okay. All right, and speaking of original content, Damien, I'm going to ask you now to step aside because you won't get any of the references that I'm about to make here. Because I want to ask Brian, I want you to rank the following shows: Breaking Bad, The Wire, and The Sopranos. And I'm leaving Mad Men out currently only because it's not finished yet.
You know the answer to this. It's Breaking Bad.
And then where would you rank the other two?
You know, I've never watched The Wire. So, and I've been told. I knew I had to get one sometime. No, it's been recommended to me for years, and I just haven't gotten around to it. It's almost like it's too gritty. But
well, and I'll make this admission. I just got started with it. I'm at the beginning of season 3 right now. I can see why everybody loves it because it's phenomenal. Right? Okay. Sad trouble for myself. So, but yes, but I would rank Breaking Bad at the top as well.
All right, so I don't need to watch The Wire then, right? You just
no, but you still.
Spoiler alert!
It's still worth it though.
But
I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know.
I just got through watching True Detective, and I can't process where it ranks in the overall scheme of things. But that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh, you got to see it. You'll love it.
Damien, do you know what we're talking about?
No,
Damien doesn't have a TV, does he?
No, we do have a TV. We have a huge TV, but we have an antenna. Swear to God, have an antenna.
So does Tony. What's
so I can watch football. That's about it. That's the only thing I'll ever watch on TV is football. So or documentaries via Netflix or something like that. We do watch a lot of kids movies though.
That surprises me because I would think he'd be watching television and not watching football. You don't look like the football type.
I don't know, man. Yeah, long story on that. Hey, speaking of Breaking Bad, back in early 2013, you said you might come out of retirement to kick my writing ass. Then not long after that, you skewered Jay Bear for writing a dumb headline. And
did?
Your Twitter persona is infamous for the harassment, right? So should people actually follow you and engage you on Twitter?
You've noticed that I've been much more muted on Twitter.
You've been mild.
I'm too busy and too old. But I don't know. Twitter to me is just a goofy diversion, and if you get my sense of humor, then you know never to take me seriously. But that's the thing, when there's 160,000 people following you, they don't all know me at all.
Right.
And so finally I just kind of said, I'm tired of being misunderstood. Is it really worth it to throw out some obscure funny thing that some people get but most people don't? And the other thing is I tend to be fairly on a range from ironic to sarcastic. That's me. And it just amazes me because I once read a statistic, and I don't know the exact percentages, but an alarmingly large number of people can't detect irony or sarcasm. And our whole culture seems to be built on irony and sarcasm. So do people, is like most of the population like my mom, just going through life and it's all going right by them? Well, I just save it for you guys, which, Damien doesn't understand what I'm talking about, but Jerod does. So
Right.
Right.
And Damien must be in charge of the buttons.
No, he is.
No,
No, I meant Jerod. That's right.
Yeah.
What did I say that one time? One of you's from Indiana and one's from Illinois, and I confused the two, and I said whatever up there.
Yeah.
Hey, I was actually born.
Now you know what our editorial meetings are like, people.
Well, my favorite part was, man, when I was on it, because the conference call phone calls are like, you can't understand crap anyway, and you're talking, Brian, you're talking, and you're going on and talking about somebody needs to do something, and you kind of giving directions and stuff like that, and then it dawns on me, he's talking about me. And the thing was, it's when you're pronouncing my name wrong. And I was just like, I need to tell him, man.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
Who needs to spell Damien with an E? I mean, didn't you see The Exorcist? Wait, no, it's The Omen. Yeah, we do have 2 Rottweilers if you want to borrow them, Damien.
Yeah, right. Jerod, just quit it, man.
It's too much fun.
Yeah. Okay, so getting back to this, everyone, I don't know, is enjoying this, but we are. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. So hey, so you comment on your Google Plus journalism thing. So, of course, journalists are worried that native advertising will skewer the truth, and I've gotten a few comments during this native advertising survey that, in essence, say, "How are you going to keep a journalistic balance?" And so my question for you, what's your response to that?
Us? We've never tried to keep a journalistic balance. We make it quite clear that we are trying to teach you, and we are also in the process trying to sell stuff. So we are transparent, and because we are marketers speaking to other marketers, early on I went kind of overboard on the transparency thing. I turned everything into a wink and a smile, a game, a spot the technique kind of thing. And now you'll see that a lot of people, especially in the startup world, but people like Moz, Rand Fishkin is so transparent he makes me squirm. I mean, but that's the thing. You may wonder if this amount of transparency is right for you, but you'll never say, I think they're hiding something from me.
Right.
And I get in arguments with journalists all the time because I'm like, do you really believe you're objective? Not you, but journalism as a whole. Now, of course, everyone will say, okay, so Fox News, we know they're not objective. But really, is anyone to a certain degree? Any human being, the choice of words they use will demonstrate bias. I mean, anyone who understands cognitive psychology knows there is no such thing as objectivity. We are subjective beings. So we can try to be objective, or we can adapt and we can just be ultra transparent. And I think we're going to end up debating about this quite a bit, as you've seen, Damien. But it's not going to change the fact that if you want journalism to exist, you're probably going to have to go with native ads, because we can rat around everything else so easily, and that's why content marketing works better than advertising and traditional marketing. But there still has to be some way to fund models that aren't going to sell stuff. Like, if the Dallas Morning News can start selling software, it's just not going to happen.
I want to talk about your hat, Brian.
Yes.
For those listening on the podcast, it's a Broncos hat, a Denver Broncos hat. How long did it take you to pull that back out and get it into the rotation after the events of early February?
So what's today?
Today is March 24th.
And this is, as you know, is the only hat I had in the office. After I got here, realized I was about to be on video and had been moving all morning from one house to another. So, I'm not saying I'm not still proud of the Broncos, but I have not worn any Broncos gear until today. And it's still kind of searing my head a little bit right now.
Okay, so before I ask you a follow-up question on native advertising, I want to ask you a Broncos question that I was thinking about as we prepped for this moment.
Would you rather Cowboys?
Hey, I'm no Cowboys fan. Well, and you have DeMarcus Ware now, so you took the Cowboys' heart and soul. But question about the Broncos: would you rather have the next 2 or 3 years of Peyton Manning, or would you rather have the next 10 years the career of Johnny Manziel? And you are, of course, a supporter of the Aggies. Which would you choose?
Wow. Um,
Maybe should have given you some prep time on this one, huh?
well, the question is, okay, at some point soon, Peyton will retire. That frees up like what, $18 million. But there's no one you can go get who's going that you just can't swap out quarterbacks that way. So you're going to have to bring someone up, right? Now, I have a sentimental interest in Johnny, but I am not convinced he's going to make it. I mean, those guys are big. They really are. And one day you're not going to get that scramble done, and boom, Joe Theismann.
It's true.
I don't know. I'm rooting for Johnny, but I think he's going to be with another team, and we'll let him try him out, and then we'll take $18 million and give it to him if he's so.
And you got a chance to get back to the Super Bowl the next couple years. So, good answer. All right. Okay, yeah. So let me ask the real quick follow-up question on native advertising. Then, what do you think is the single most important factor for doing native advertising right?
So I wrote this article over at Say Daily and linked to it on Copyblogger as a way to start the conversation. Some people don't even know what native advertising is, which is kind of surprising to me because there's been so much talk about it for the last year and a half. And there were really three things that I pointed out in that context, but I'm going to boil it down to one, which was the final part of that article, which is you use native advertising to build an audience, while traditionally with advertising, we were simply buying someone else's audience temporarily. If you are smart in this environment and you have a long-term strategy in mind, then you're content marketing, but you need to accelerate that outreach and exposure. Jerod, you've started many blogs. Damien, you did Copybot. Beginning days of Copyblogger were like crickets chirping for those first 3 months while I constantly tried to figure out a way. Exactly. It was that cricket, actually. Trying to get someone to notice. It wasn't like the content's not good, but it still takes everyone that hustle, period. And that's the whole concept of the minimum viable audience. When you get to that point, your life changes because the audience starts building itself. Until you get to that point, it can be lonely, and you're going to have to spend time or money to get to the MVA. And I see native advertising as a way to accelerate that process, but you'd have to be silly to keep going back and paying them to borrow the audience when you can build your own. But I see a lot of short-term thinking out there. It's just like, run the ads, sell the product directly, money now, It's unfortunate because an audience gives you that compounded exponential return over time instead of just placing another ad. It seems very disempowering, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whatever.
Over to you, Damien.
Yeah, thanks. So I think it was the third or the fourth episode of The Rainmaker. You said that you were going to start taking voice lessons. Did you do that because someone made fun of you?
No. In fact, most people said, you sound fine, don't worry about it.
Right.
And then mainly it's because Robert is a professionally trained voice actor, in addition to being an actor. Is
that why he sounds so good?
Yes, Damien.
That's not natural talent?
No, Damien. But, so yeah, that was really what prompted that. But Robert said, just keep going. And generally, I trust what he says because he's not afraid to tell me what he thinks at all. But he's noted that I've gotten better with every episode, and I'm getting, really what it comes down to is I need to sound as natural as possible, and I have a way to go. But from looking into voice lessons, practice is the most important thing that gets you better.
So are you taking lessons?
No, I'm just doing.
Just doing.
I figure, and the other interesting thing also is that the second season of New Rainmaker, if you will, we've already decided how we're going to do that, and we will be playing to each other's strengths. So you might imagine whose voice you may hear more of.
Mmm.
Mm. See.
Ooh.
Is that a Darth Vader thing?
I don't know. They describe it as drama here in the effects page for Google Hangouts, so
These are all
seemed
built
appropriate. Yeah,
to
it's
Google.
all built into Hangouts. Part of why we're doing this, so we can show people the full breadth of capabilities that Hangouts have.
All right, so let me
Fascinating.
ask you another question. So last week, get your thoughts on another scandal, if you will. Last week, Google.
Scandal. We're such nerds that we think any of this is scandal.
I know, right? Get excited. I know. So last week, Google penalized a huge guest blogging network, My Guest Blog. What's your response? Good, bad, indifferent? Why should writers care? Should writers fear Google? And should writers ever guest post again?
This is an interesting question because when that network debuted, I asked Ann Smarty on Google Plus, please, I'm really interested. Please explain to me how this isn't going to get you penalized. And she never responded to me. And then this happened, and I'm not going Schadenfreude on this at all. I really wanted to know. But from my perspective, I'm like, that's what's going to happen to you. You know?
Right.
My entire career, I guess, since starting Copyblogger was always never bet against Google. That was why, even back when the black hat stuff still worked better, I was straight and narrow, content, no buying links, no building links, attracting links, everything you have to do now, right? I was doing back then and teaching people, and half the people listened, and those people never got hit by Panda or Penguin or anything. The other half said, you're a loser, and they rebuilt their sites 5 times. So I hate waking up and having something I've worked hard on penalized or whatever. It just makes me sick. And I know some really smart SEOs who love the challenge of, you know, outsmarting the current version of the algorithm, but I don't like that. That's the media approach. You know, you don't do 3 seasons of Seinfeld thinking, well, this could get us thrown off the air, but we'll take that chance.
Right.
No one does that, right? And that's the difference in mentality, right? So
Right.
that's another example of what I mean by media, not marketing. You know, long-term value over short-term results. So I feel bad for all the people that got dinged by that, but I just thought that seemed kind of like a foretold outcome based on how it was structured.
So guest posting, is that still a legitimate strategy?
I think it is in the way that it works offline. Like if you want to get published by The Atlantic, then you submit an article and they review it, and if it's up to their standards and fits their editorial mix, then they will edit it and they will publish it, like we do on Copyblogger. Media, not marketing.
Media, not marketing.
That's
pretty good
with
answer,
the
man.
question, but yeah, this is the gist of what I'm trying to get across to people at New Rainmaker, which is everything you do that doesn't mimic offline media is probably going to get you in trouble.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things inherent about the online environment that allow you to scale in certain ways and do really cool things, but every time people try to avoid just the basic work of producing media quality content, something bad tends to happen.
Right.
Damien, did you have another question?
I did. Did you?
I do, but I'm willing to let you go first.
Okay, because I've just asked 2 in a row. I'm cool with that.
No, never mind that. I'm going to go.
Right.
Okay, so one more quick pop culture question for you before I get to a question about our decision earlier this week to remove blog comments, which I know people will love to hear your thoughts on. I want to talk with you real quick about House of Cards. And let's say that we were casting House of Cards from the Copyblogger universe. You might be Francis Underwood. Robert might be considered Doug Stamper. Sonia absolutely would not be Claire Underwood. But what I'm curious about is who would be Raymond Tusk?
Raymond is Francis' right-hand man. Are we allowed to give spoilers?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, we can give spoilers on that one.
Wait, but I'm blanking on the name. So that's
Oh, Tusk. He's the guy that was opposing Francis Underwood. He
that,
had to go there and get his approval to be vice president in
you
season
mean
1.
Warren Buffett?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Warren Buffett would be Tusk.
Okay.
And you didn't know he was on our board of advisors.
Yeah, well, there we go. Now we know.
No. Who would in the Copyblogger universe?
Yeah, in the Copyblogger universe. So not
So what's
necessarily.
this guy like?
He's like Warren Buffett.
He's really wealthy and
He's from St. Louis, actually.
Well, we don't know that Warren Buffett manipulates the political system behind the scenes, but that's the implication, right? I mean, they did cast this guy in a very obvious way. I don't know much about Warren Buffett, but anyway. In the Copyblogger universe, first I'd like to object that you think I'm Francis Underwood. I am nowhere near that good, but I'm working on it. Who would be Tusk? No one. I wish we had a Tusk.
Yeah. Okay.
that's a bad answer. What? All right.
Okay, so let's move on here. Regarding comments on the blog, we recently closed them, obviously. When did you first consider closing them? I mean, obviously, it's not something that was decided just in a day. When did you first get the inkling that it was something that you might want to do, might want to consider? And I guess just your general thoughts on what the reaction's been and what you think of it so far.
First considered it about 8 years ago.
Right around when the blog started.
And about 3 months in, once the audience showed up, I was like, some of these people, no. Seriously, though, for probably the last 3 years, it's interesting because feedback is such an important part of the model that we talk about. And then at some point on Copyblogger, the feedback no longer played a role. I think there is the life in a publication where you understand your audience from serving them year after year after year to the point where you'll see newbies come by and say something that reflects that they have no idea necessarily what they're talking about, but that doesn't make us change anything, right? The feedback stopped impacting editorial as much as it does when you have a younger site. Okay, and that's really a good thing. In essence, you realize, and again, for 3 years, we didn't just turn them off. We said, maybe this feedback function is not as critical to our editorial direction as it used to be. Because now, Copyblogger reacts editorially more to, it's always reacted within the context of the broader industry, of course, but then it also reacted on a more personal level during the early days. So you'll notice that I went over to Entreproducer and started testing out my newer ideas with a new audience, a smaller audience, relished the feedback, and that's how New Rainmaker was developed. I've never said that out loud before, but that's the truth. So now at New Rainmaker, as I said on Twitter today, we do have comments open because I still think at this stage I really want that intimate feedback mechanism.
Right.
But, on big sites like TechCrunch, for example, they have comments for page views. That's it. They don't care what you think, right? I mean, so everything we do is designed to have a purpose that is constructive and useful, and most of the best conversations that we have right now are on Google+, where people are who they say they are, not Seattle SEO services.
They're still there, though.
I mean, and again, the whole misguided teaching by some gurus of blog commenting as a traffic strategy. I had to fight that the whole time, and it's really annoying.
Right.
But
yep.
Anyway, so yeah, I don't think I think comments are invaluable in a blog's life or a we stopped being a blog a long time ago when you think about it. But
Right.
at some point, they become more of a meaningless chore than they become any real value when most of the best stuff is on Twitter and Google+, LinkedIn, Facebook, without the moderation. Because we're answering people there already and moderating. How many a day, Jerod? I remember when you took over and I said, "You having fun yet?" And I was still going in there and moderating comments because the spammers are so clever about the ones that are borderline.
Right.
You're like reading it and you're like, "Oh, you are a total spammer." Delete.
Yeah.
But you don't just delete comments without really making that evaluation, and that's not something that's quick, you know. So that started slowing things down a lot. But I am insanely anal about what appears on our site, you know. And if I let a spam comment slip through, I'm embarrassed. I'm mortified. Maybe I'm overreacting, but that's how I've always approached Copyblogger. It's like our sacred ground. This is our one place in the universe that we control, you know, the content and the quality, and that's important.
Yeah, and the idea of...
Damien's getting annoyed with the applause.
Hey, I wanted to say, Jerod, you look a lot like Wolverine.
He does. That's a good point. He does.
Thank
look
you.
like Wolverine.
Now, I was going to say
I'll
about
take
the, you know, like...
And you look like our Lord and Savior.
That's the new name of the show, right? Wolverine, our Lord and the Savior.
Wolverine and our Lord and Savior today on Google+.
That's right. So, but I mean, yeah, you know, like comments being like a user-generated, you know, strategy. Also, that idea of like, you know, an SEO strategy that went away a long time ago too.
It hasn't been relevant in so long. I can't believe it. You know.
Right.
But on Copyblogger, you would always see the cycle. There'd always be the class of whatever 6 months. And then they'd finally give up and quit commenting on Copyblogger. And then you'd see a new group of people who got the advice that you need to comment on big blogs.
All right.
It's not like we don't know that, all right?
Yeah, no. All right, so hey, I got one more final question. So on your bio on Copyblogger, it says you've been mentioned in 17 books. What is the most satisfying book to be mentioned in?
Lynchpin by Seth Godin.
Why is that?
Because it's Seth Godin, and it was using me as an example of a linchpin. That's pretty damn flattering right there.
That is. It's better than a blog post. So.
I was actually mentioning Meatball Sunday, and I'm like, Seth, thanks, but no one read that book. That's the worst title ever. So.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty bad too. I let Seth know that, by the way.
No, actually, I'm honored to be mentioned anywhere. I mean, people don't realize. They think that, oh, well, you get mentioned a lot, then it means nothing to you. But no, it's always an honor for someone to write a book, which is torturous, and, you know, use you as an example. I think that's really cool. So that's why I always link to everyone's book if I am aware of it. You know, a little give back, I guess. Plus, it doesn't hurt to say you've been mentioned in books.
That's why you're our CEO.
It's going to be you guys going forward. No one's going to know who I am, and that's okay.
All right, so Damien, do you have a final tally?
Then I will be Raymond Tusk at that point.
Yes, there you go.
Pick it up a little. I will happily go be Raymond Tusk.
Yeah, well, in spite of
Frank Underwood has way too much exposure.
That's true.
In spite of Jerod's overzealous use of the applaud button,
I think he's been doing fantastic.
Watch, I can also mute Damien too. See, he's muted now and he doesn't even know it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
okay, wait, come back, Damien. How do I unmute you? There you go. Are you back?
No, he's still muted.
Now I am there.
Oh,
there he is.
So just keep in mind, okay, this is a new world record on our show. So.
9.77 out of 11 for those listening on the podcast.
And so basically I got the trombone because I haven't seen The Wire. You know, if you guys would work harder, I'd have more TV.
Let's go. So we'll be seeing that memo later, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have an autoresponder watching The Wire.
Watching The Wire.
Figure it out yourself.
Yeah. That's pretty much how it goes.
All right, thanks, Brian.
All right, yep. With that said, this episode of Hangout Hot Seat is over. We thank Brian Clark for joining us. Damien, thank you for the exuberant question asking. Very much appreciate it. And we will catch you next time.
Cool. Thanks, guys.